Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we have a guest from Taiwan, and he's American, but he lives in Taiwan. He's Thomas La Grua. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
And so the topic is open source direct democracy. So what is this all about, Thomas? Let us know, first of all, what is wrong then with the current democratic system that we have, and specifically the representative democracy? What do you have to say about this?
Okay, first of all, representative democracy as we know it, as we think we know it, really doesn't even exist. It's an oxymoron having the representative connected to democracy, because, as I said, no one ever participated in something by sending their representative. It's like saying participation by proxy. So we've been living in an illusion, basically, thinking representative democracy was our rights, freedom of choice, free choice, freedoms. And when in reality it's not a choice when someone comes up to you and says, hey, here you go, choose. Would you like Roundup or Agent Orange? All right. Would you like to put the blindfold on when we shoot you, or close your eyes? That's not a choice. So I would say one of the things that we require to do before we are able to change the situation is get out to people that representative democracy has. Within representative democracy, it doesn't exist. Democracy doesn't exist. There is no representative democracy. It's either democracy or it's another form of power and control, oligarchy. These days, people like to call it crony capitalism or corporate capitalism, and in the past we called it fascism. So
exactly.
It's not there.
And we have been discussing also, for people that are new to this hangout, we've been discussing this topic of why democracy doesn't exist and how capitalism, which is an economic system, has infiltrated into politics. So right now our politicians are mostly lobbying for capitalist interests. But what would you say in relation to this? Because we always have this mentality as humanity that, you know, this is a problem that they imposed onto us. The elite is doing this onto us, and they took our power away. What do you have to say about this?
Our power is the power that we give them is what they use, and so in a sense, we do. Okay, let me just read something that I wrote. Concerning the elite's power, and how we sometimes think that we are under their control. The irony is that tyrants and politicians do actually represent the will, or the lack thereof, of the people. They represent us to the degree of power and control that we give unto them through our explicit and implied acceptances and allowances, our lack of will to take responsibility, stand up, and collectively determine the course of mankind. In other words, the degree by which the people have abdicated our will, which is our power, our will to collectively determine the course of mankind, the course of one's nation, is the degree of power and control that we allot to the tyrants, the bankers, the politicians, whatever you want to call them, to exercise that power as they will. So it's just a question of us standing up and doing it, realizing that it's not about protesting, it's not about asking them to do it. As soon as we ask them to do it, it's almost the same as blaming. As soon as we point the finger, that same direction we point our fingers is kind of like our willpower, our ability to take charge and determine for ourselves what we're going to do, what we're going to make of ourselves. We just let that go. So nothing's going to change until we actually stand up and become the changes, do it. And in standing up and doing something, we actually take back our power and control. I would say the latest example of that came back when on the internet, the Syrian crisis, where the United States was getting ready to attack Syria. Sure, Russia had a lot to do with that, but I would say also that the world just standing up and using our words, stating clearly, this is where we stand, do not attack Syria, also basically just took, relieved those who were looking to attack from the power that we had actually given them by complacency and apathy.
I'd like to also take this point on mentioning the internet and the current technologies that we have and placing the title as open source, which is a common denominator to everything that is possible now with the technology, the social media, the power that we have in order to say this is what I stand for example, as part of our political participation, so to speak, in cyberspace. But as you're mentioning, it has had actual effects such as preventing, through public opinion, the war that was imminent, apparently, towards Syria, for example. So now that we know that, for example, our media is biased in relation to the information that we get, the internet is a very cool way to inform ourselves. But it is also now the source of another antagonism that is going on when we learn about the secrets that are being revealed of how our governments operate and so forth. How could you say, in relation to, for example, what has been revealed about the NSA and these organizations that control everything and that spy on everyone, how could we use this technology that they're using for the sake of control, of course, and how would that be applied or used in this open source democracy?
Well, I guess first of all, what we see from the exposure of the NSA, exposure of the government, that there really are no more secrets. There never have been. There really are no secrets on the internet anymore. And I would say, why should we expect there even to be secrets? Because it is called the public domain of the internet. So even expecting that we should have privacy and secrecy on information that we send out into the airwaves of the public is kind of like expecting that we should be able to walk down a public street and start changing our clothes and demand privacy, demand that everyone turn their eyes, shutter their windows. Because this is our information, this is the picture of me. So I think what that's showing us is, in a sense, that there's no sense in fearing what is already here. And that's kind of, I guess we could say, the truth of what we are in terms of our digitized information of ourselves. Everything that leaves from us through, and it can be either computer, the telephone networks, anything. As soon as it goes into digital space, that's the public domain. I mean, even most constitutions in the world will recognize that the digital airwaves belong to the people, to the public, regardless of what government one has in place. And so as soon as we even get on our cell phones, we ought to understand that that cell phone is using the digital airways, the public airways, and there is no more secrecy. That's entering the public domain. That becomes public information, regardless of what laws there have. The bottom line is that anyone with the tools and the knowledge of how to use them is able to access that information. So the idea that there's anything secret anymore is just that. It's an idea. It's a dream. It's not there. So we might as well first recognize that there are no more secrets in the world that cannot be just tapped into. Once you put it out there on the airwaves, it becomes accessible by anyone with the tools. And so going from there, we say, okay, well, what we've got is a government in fear of the people and people in fear of the government. And so what do people do when they're in fear of each other? They try to gain the advantage, and that's currently what the government is doing. And they're succeeding, I would say, in many ways, in some ways winning. They're succeeding because they are more organized than the people. And
Exactly.
not even, it's not even, doesn't even have to be so much the government. It can be the interests, the interests that are overseeing, in a sense, the government. That would be the corporations, where I mentioned corporatism and crony capitalism. The corporate interests that are overseeing the government, the money, the big money you could call it, they are organized and united in the goal. And they understand their goal better than, I would say, the majority of the people. Their goal is to make profits. And whatever they can make a profit of, those are whatever we accept and allow them to profitize, they will do. That's the law. We're actually giving them, telling them exactly what to do by what we accept and allow them to do. So we take that responsibility onto us and say, oh, okay, we have the ability to change the way they behave just by changing the way we behave, changing what we will accept and allow. So an understanding that the government is already surveilling us because of the fear of us, they're surveilling us. Well, let's turn that that movement around. Take the flow, the outflow of what the government is doing, what the government is calling for, and let's direct it. Let's say, okay, we agree with you. Let's open up. Let's open up. Let's remove the secrecy. With secrecy comes abuse. Let's remove the secrecy and instill accountability into the public domain. And let's redirect that focus onto the government. And in doing so, we not only start seeing what they're doing, but we also are able to create, for example, a new access way into the government, into the understanding of how government currently functions, so as to understand how we are able to change it, but also a doorway for placing into positions, political offices, newly elected government officials who agree to this, to the new direction of direct democracy, open source direct democracy. And there are numerous ways we can do this, including getting them to, before they're elected, sign a pledge. You can call it something like the Pledge of the Elected, or something like that, wherein they agree to, how do you say, practice what the government preaches. We'll take it a step further, from the government surveilling all of our videos, all of our internet feeds, our communication, cell phone networks, etc. We'll take it a step further, in a sense, and say, okay, we agree to this. And now we're taking the initiative. We're using the current flow, the movement of the flow, and we're just directing it. We agree to this, but let's broaden the scope. Let's also place it where it is very important, also in the opposite end of the pointed weapons of information onto the government offices as a whole. So, for example, when a newly elected official, before we say, hey, we will vote for you, but there are two primary things you have to sign, agree to,
So
legal documents.
That, for example, means then that we will use what the technology that is currently used for surveillance, spying, and so forth. We expand it onto the government. That's what you're saying, in essence. And so then anyone that pledges to be part of the government will also agree that government will no longer be the secrecy act, so to speak, but will be a part of the openness that they are already imposing onto everyone else. And so this general openness is what will lead to what you're defining as open source direct democracy. We have a question from Rebecca, and it says, you can also see it. Is it also to realize how what we have accepted has become automated, and because of this, it is going to take an effort to change the course of our behavior? And that also has to do maybe with a point of, dismantling this entire mentality of government. Maybe that's what you referred to, Rebecca, in relation to the acceptance of only a few taking control of everything. What would you say on that?
Okay, if I may first, there's just one thing with regard to the government using the technology you mentioned to oversee the government. I would say what the government's using is cloak and dagger surveillance technology behind their veil. We don't even require to use that kind of cloaking technology to cover up who's seeing. Google, for example, simple video live 24/7 internet feeds in the offices and on the communications, any communications, telephones, faxes, computers, absolutely everything. Read access only, not write onto the government. So open source direct democracy, where we're holding the government accountable for what they're doing. So no, not using that same technology. It's not necessary. We're doing it openly. As for, is it also to realize how we have accepted, what we have accepted has become automated, and because of this, it's going to take an effort. Yes, most definitely. One of the main things is in looking at representative democracy, what I finally came to the conclusion of is it just doesn't exist. It's an illusion. We've come to use these words, associate these definitions with things without really looking at how they in practice actually work. So democracy in its true nature is obviously direct democracy, and it requires participation of all who are able to participate, participating on a regular basis, so as it's able to function. Its functionality is ensured. It requires participation, and the very aspect of representation in there negates the participation. You don't have participation by proxy, although it is a kind of a legally accepted term. It's one of those terms we use in a legal sense, but it does not make sense. No one ever participated in anything by sending a proxy, a representative. So yeah, we've got to first really, I guess, get people to understand that we've never had democracy.
Exactly.
So this, yeah.
That would be mostly it, and so it will take a redefinition of what is democracy, which is not, as we've mentioned also in the past, just voting for in a popularity context and asking for change, but actually becoming politically active, and the technology right now can enable that. As Thomas is mentioning, we can have all of this information as an open database that we can simply access and then partake in the decisions that will affect our lives. And also this goes hand in hand with understanding that the current officials, government officials, might not agree with this. So what we also suggest here as part of the living income guarantee proposal, and which this topic in itself, the open source direct democracy, is part of it, is part of what we propose, creating new political parties. Because if we ask the system to be implemented, obviously it will be most likely answered with a resounding no. So we have to become first, like get into the government first, to then be able to implement this. Or maybe, who knows, we can actually propose it as, okay, let's have an openness and transparency for everyone, because to me it also seems kind of hypocritical that we demand them for transparency, integrity, and being open, but also in our own lives we don't realize that we create the nature of the system. So what would you say also in relation to who we are within the system and what should we as individuals do?
Well, yeah, that's just it. I mean, what they're doing unto us in terms of spying on us, um, in terms of operating from behind the veil, for example, of secrecy, the government, the NSA, the CIA, the Defense Department, and the list goes on of private contractors, in terms of them operating from behind the veil of secrecy, is basically exactly what we're doing ourselves. And they're doing it also. And until we stand up and take the initiative of saying, okay, no more secrecy, no more are we going to expect things to be private in the public domain, because we have come to recognize that the anon username, the anonymous username, is synonymous with abuse, as criminalities. Bank robbers don't go into a bank with their anonymous veils covering their face. And so everyone who seeks to protect themselves by remaining anonymous is only considering themselves. It's a me thing, wherein the only way to expose the abusers, the criminals, is to expose ourselves. Everyone who is standing there exposed and saying, "This is who I am. Come and see. I have nothing to hide." Okay, then it's really easy to spot the ones with the veils. The anonymous. We say, okay, if you want to remain anonymous, you're not going to participate with us, because because how do we tell the difference between the anonymous and the criminals, the abusers, the pedophiles, the trolls,
drug dealers, and so forth?
Exactly.
And also within this, I'd like to point out, for example, the idea that many people have in relation to things like Bitcoin. This will work because then it's like side view in the entire establishment, and this is like a secrecy thing going on with Bitcoin. And it's the same thing. People believe that they can make Bitcoin, for example, mainstream, but its intention is precisely to curb this entire control that that already exists, obviously, in the entire economic system and currency and all these form of control that we've also discussed here. But what we also mean with open source is precisely that there's no more hiding, there's no more secrets, because that leads to abuse, as you pointed out. And that's why if you don't have anything to hide, then why fearing having your database being open to everyone? So that's something that many people are very resilient to understand or to want to be open. But it also has to do with our own mentality as human beings, like our privacies, our everything. And yes, as we were talking before the hangout, it's not like we will have cameras in our bedrooms or bathrooms, So what would you say about this?
Well, first of all, it's the public domain. The private domain is in one's house, in the bathroom, and in one's house. That is already classified an understandable definition as the differences of domains. Private domain within one's house, on one's personal property, whereas you walk out the door, it becomes public domain. And it's like having a community. Say we're a community of 100 houses, and now each time we walk outside, we put a disguise on. We cover our faces with veils, and then we walk around, and then we start noticing that things are missing, and there's been a child kidnapped or something, and we say, well, how do we find out who's doing this? And we say, well, what do we do? What do we do? We want the government to save us. No. What we do is we take off our veils, okay? And then we say, okay, now we have cameras in the streets, everywhere in the public domain. So the only way to spot the criminals, the abusers, is first to separate, in a sense, categorize those who are still wearing the veils, those who are still hiding something. And from there, if everyone removes their veils, well then we have accountability, which is kind of like an imposed, implemented, inputted form of integrity. And it really is people policing, self-policing, wherein everyone's accountable. So we cut down crime by basically 99, almost 100%. The remainder is basically the sickness that is still there, the people that will go out and commit crimes and do abuses, and know they're going to get caught, but not care. That's a separate category of sickness, psychological sickness.
Yeah, and that's a whole other topic, because that's like the changes that have to take place within ourselves as human beings, our minds. But in relation to the system, I fully agree with what you've explained in relation to developing rather this self-integrity, having nothing to hide, and understand that it's for the betterment of our society to actually have this openness. And yes, many people might say, well, it can be abuse and you don't know who you're dealing with. Well, we are the majority people, so we have to really understand that we have the power to decide how things and how that information can be used. And also place the limits. I mean, as we were saying, we have to define what's private, like our houses, and everything that we do in our houses cannot be surveilled, of course. But when we go outside, when we are part of the public domain, in our reality, in our world, everything should be open, and that will lead then to this, like the antidote to corruption is precisely transparency and integrity and openness. So this is precisely what I now see that open source direct democracy represents and is. It has to be implemented by ourselves. So we are getting to the end of this hangout. Would you like to add anything more to this?
Yeah, there's a plan I've been looking at. You know, the question is, how are we going to get to this open source democracy? Because we have a catch-22 situation. Open source democracy, in essence, means that those in power, those currently in government, are going to have to let go of that power and control. Basically, government should go from those in power to administrative positions. We can actually change the name. No more does it require to be called government. We call them public administrators. And so in order to get to that state, I think what we could do is get the message out there about democracy as it currently is. It's not democracy. Representative democracy is not democracy. It's a hypocrisy, an oxymoron, and an illusion. And secondly, so to get there, one of the things we could start implementing, perhaps, for example, something like through petitions on the web, getting out there a kind of petition requesting, calling on all would-be politicians to sign this petition, a pledge, to, number one, first thing upon entering office, open their offices up to the public scrutiny, to their employers, the public. Allow us as employers to see 24/7 what is going on in the offices of our employees. That means live video feed, mics on the cameras everywhere in every office, except of course the bathrooms, private places, and private telephones. So that's taking the initiative of the government surveillance and us using the force of that flow and directing it. And from that, then we have that another initiative that the newly elected representatives, as we would call them, public officials, would also sign, agreeing to, committing to begin the process of implementing open source direct democracy, wherein it would start out with just having putting in the program there that we could get from any one of these big companies of public meetings on the internet. For example, like a lot of the forums on the internet, wherein people have a proposal, they put it out there on the internet, the government website, that's completely public. It gets voted up or voted down, for example. People can add to that proposal, and after a certain amount of time, the proposals that have reached up to a point can be voted on at a certain time. And once that's voted on and agreed upon by the people, then the job of the public administrator, that so-called government official, would be to implement that. And that could be the start of, for example, direct democracy. Eventually, as going through the trials, getting to the point where, okay, we no longer even require to have elections anymore, because the elections and the voting process is participatory democracy. Everyone's participating, and sure, everyone would be required to participate, and this is where living income comes in there also, because with you have certain categories of participation, natural resources, financial, public services, etc. And those people who are have these certain skills ought to naturally gravitate toward what they are very good at. So you would have almost like the real natural selection, wherein someone says, you know, I'm good at this area, and I'm going to go investigate this, and I'm going to go participate there. Where other people who are good at other specialty, other aspects of life, say, this is what I'm good at, I enjoy doing it, I'm going to investigate here. And so that's really, instead of having survival of the fittest, we go to what natural selection process should be. It should be a self-determination process where each of us is able to say, this is where I want to be participating. And it's not about money anymore, because as with the living income guarantee, everyone's guaranteed a dignified life. So we all have the ability to say, okay, this is how I'm going to participate. It's not you must do this or you must do that.
Exactly. The entire coercion process, not only to believe that by voting it's our civil participation, but also in relation to jobs, we will be able to, through our participation in the system, be democratically active, meaning we vote and we direct with our very participation in the system, which is what I see is the most eloquent way of looking at democracy. Not only a voting process, a popularity contest, but actually voting with our actions, deciding the course of the entire system, how we will be functioning by us that become professionals in certain areas or have a particular point of affinity toward this or that sector of public services or production, etc. And then we will have that real choice to decide not only who is only managing the process of this getting implemented, but also ourselves becoming directly active and ensuring that my participation in the system is already part of this democratic system. Others can maybe also, let's say, suggest new ways of doing things, and it becomes not only the decisions made by a few, but that is what really everyone's work, everyone's participation then becomes part of our public accountability, so to speak. So that sounds really good, and I fully agree with that, and it goes completely aligned with what living income is, because if we provide then the money for everyone to not have to take these shitty jobs, menial jobs to go by and live, but if we instead give this opportunity to participate and to do what they are more, wanting to do as a point even of preference, real choice, then not only jobs will become something that we enjoy doing, but it will become activity that is actually supporting a better society overall.
Right.
So,
effectively eliminating elitism.
That's right. And so we will stop seeing our governments as these chiefs, these masters, these elite societies that are secret and that only manage their own interests. That would be debunked, but it has to be you know, it takes two to tango, as I say. So if we ask that transparency and integrity to them as government officials or these people that will ensure that things get done, only have no other point of, you know, as part of their activities won't be to make the decisions themselves, because for that we will have the open source direct democracy, which, for example, the Pirate Party also calls it liquid democracy, and it's already developing a program that can do what you were mentioning.
Cool.
So it's already in the airwaves, it's already in the making. So we only require to integrate this aspect of let's not fear being open and having this open source everything, because that is what will debunk also the idea that I can profit from secrecy, patents, and so forth. That is mostly the reason why everything is copyrighted and secret and sold. So when we realize that it is for our own benefit, then we can understand the real benefit of what empowering people and supporting each other in an openness is for the betterment of everyone, actually. So
Exactly.
we'll get into the, now it's the time when we have to end the hangout. So thanks a lot, Thomas, for being here and for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And also for the time, because he's right now midnight in Taiwan. So
no, actually it's 3:30. 3:30 a.m.
Yes, exactly. So
okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, and to everyone, meet us again in another live. We will hang out next weekend at the same time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Marlen.